Have you done a soil test recently for your garden? If not, this video is for you. It really helps you to understand why soil tests are important even if you're a home gardener, and why it is so helpful for you to do this right now in spring to really get a head start on the season. What I'm going to show you in this video is truly the full process of taking a soil sample, sending it off to my vendor of choice for the soil test, and we even see the results later at the end of the video, and what I'm going to do with those results and what actions I will take after those results are coming in. So let's go take some soil samples. I do soil tests for each and every bed, so for my flower beds and each of my vegetable beds, to just ensure that I have a good sample, because in each bed I grew a different set of plants and different set of nutrient requirements in the past year, so they most likely come back different. How do I typically do my soil samples? I have this little soil probe because I do a soil test every year, and that just makes it more handy, but you can use a shovel and that's perfectly fine as well. You want to make sure you take the soil samples in about a 4 to 6 inch depth of the top of the bed. And if you have a large bed like I do here, I make sure I take a few samples along the way so I have a really good snapshot of the soil quality for this entire bed. As I'm also taking soil samples for all my beds, I typically have all the soil samples just in one plastic bag, which is named with the bed to make sure I can identify them later again. It's important to just make sure I can mix it and get a good sample across the board. So let's dig in. Why it's so important to test your soil at least once a season, to know what's going on and to make sure that you don't start your season with some nutrient deficient garden soil for whatever reason. So I always love to know rather than to assume. So for that reason, I love soil testing and do it now for 3 years running with the same provider, which I'll show you in the video today. It's not sponsored. I always pay for the soil tests by myself. It is a little bit more expensive, like when you go compared to when you go to like an extension office and drop your soil samples over there, but I'm lazy. What should I say? So I pay the $5 more per test to have this level of convenience here. I just drop it off in the mail, where I pass by multiple times a day, so it's really no added effort for me. So it's a great way to get to know what is going on in your soil. Why is soil testing so important? The soil in the end is the nutrient base for all of your plants which are growing through the year. You want to make sure that they are well fed, happy, and have a really, really great environment to grow in. And literally, you can have the greenest thumb. If your soil is not right, it won't help you, right? What are good soil practices to really keep your soil happy? Making sure you're not dumping any type of like chemicals, fertilizers in without knowing what you're doing. Fun fact, that was the reason why I wanted to do a soil test after my first garden year, because I was so new to it. I was like, oh, more is better, and was like throwing in fertilizer and any type of crap I got my hands on, so which I'm not doing anymore. But I was really wondering if I, with that like rather gracious measure of adding a lot of fertilizer and whatever I could find in the department store at that time to the soil, that I like throw something off the charts, like having, I don't know, too much phosphorus or too much nitrogen or anything out of balance. Like in real life, anything out of balance can really impact the growth habit of your soil. So what are the key things the soil test looks for? It looks for those key nutrients like NPK, which you probably already know. What does NPK stands for? Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So those are the chemical symbols for each of those elements, and they have different effects in your soil and on the plant. We know nitrogen is really important, for example, for leafy growth and like anything like green in the plant. The the middle one, the phosphorus, is typically important for like bulb, for bulbing up for your plants, so to really have and encourage blooms. And the last one, the potassium, is general there for good plant growth and like a just healthy plant overall. Any one of those by themselves really don't do anything to the plant any good, right? So you want to make sure you always have a balanced setup with most organic fertilizers and amendments. It's really, really hard to overdo it, but nevertheless, read the labels, be careful what you use. Less is more in this case, if you ask me personally. And yeah, so the soil test also looks a little bit into those other micronutrients as well, like sulfur, boron, I forget the other ones. Look at that together when we have actually the results back, because that's at the end of the video as well. I had last year in a few of my beds no sulfur at all, which is a micronutrient which helps to balance the soil and the plant growth and the health as well. And the explanation for it was that it gets quickly washed out, and we had that year before, that was 2021, we had like so much rain. It was one of the wettest years on record for us, so that was an interesting yeah, just to see how like nutrients can get flushed out of the bed when it's so heavy and so rainy. So for this test, I'm now interested to see what the 2022 season did to the balance of the nutrients in my beds, just because we had exactly the opposite. We had a drought and it was so dry for most of the season. So I'm really curious to see how that affected the nutrition of the bed, which we'll see. So how about we unbox the Maya soil test, which I'm going to use today for our home kits, and see what that looks like. So let's open the test kit. We've always here the number, how to register it, and a QR code to just understand where to go with the website. I really love the instructions, and always comes here with nice instructions. And what I really love about it is how simple it is. So it really gives you instructions on how to collect the soil sample. We've done that already, and you will see that shortly here in the video, and is really just swapping it into the mail. It always has here a little return envelope, so you all only have to put your address on, and that is all what it is. A teeny tiny scoop, and then the sample itself. I'll take one soil test per bed and just put the soil in a little plastic bag. I also take it from the different areas, as you saw in the video just when we were outside, right? And yeah, make sure you label it well, mix it well to have a good like a good mix up of all the different areas of the soil you took it from, so it's a representative sample. And yeah, then we just scoop it in here. So I usually open that first. There we go. And this has liquid, and you just keep it as it is. So you don't do anything with it except you put this scoop of soil in it. So then I'll just open this one. Take a scoop, carefully dropping it in here, and you see like one scoop really fills it up nicely, so don't overdo it with a scoop, otherwise you're creating a mess. And then seal it well, and you're done with this sample. Box that up and send it the way. Great, so we waited a week to get those soil samples back, which we send in. My soil test is really fast with it. So that's one reason why I like them. The fact that I just drop them off at the mail, and I get everything back into my email inbox within a week, which is really cool. So what I want to do before we look at the results and at the samples is to just talk briefly about the nutrients in the soil itself, right? So why are we doing this is really to understand the makeup of our soil and what we might need to add to the soil to really give our plants for the new garden year the best possible starting place. So, all right, let's look at our soil kit. So, or to our results. Once we sign into My Soil, we land at our dashboard where we see all of our tests which we have done in the past. And as I mentioned before, I'm using them now for the third year in a row. You can see here my earlier test results, 2021, and then I had a little bit more in 2022, but 2023 with all those different beds and all the flower beds now in, we did a lot of tests together. But it's a really great way also to see, did the measures help, or did the measures work which you applied last year to balance out the changes and everything else, or is it just gone in the wind, right? So let's look first into a few results for today. So from my flower bed front, so from my L, which is like more in front of the garden, I don't know why I named it that way, but and then we have here, this is my Vigo bed number 3. So this is the one which is close to the patio, which had the arch going over. And you can tell here, just by looking at the graph, they are quite different, right? So just like me jumping between those, it is very, very obvious where they are different. And then let me throw in a third one into the mix. This is here my bed number 2, where we see again a very different makeup. So this is interesting. A few areas. One theme I saw throughout all of my soil tests for all beds was that the phosphorus levels were all over the optimal range. This is like looking at the values, they are still okayish. I don't think they will cause me really big problems, because again, too much of one thing is not a good thing. So for that reason, you really want to make sure you have a balanced soil and you have a really well-equipped nutrient level in there. What is the issue with phosphorus is, despite like I mostly fertilized last year with an equal parts fertilizer for most things. I am very, very conservative with fertilizing. I just typically fertilize them every 4 weeks just to give them a little boost, because I do plant intensely and just want to make sure they get enough food for the marathon they're running, right? For that reason, I had last year in very evenly distributed fertilizer. So I think it was 11, 11, 11 for the NPK. What is the difference between those macronutrients though is the nitrogen and the potassium are leachable, or they can dissolve in the soil, and they also get taken up easier. The phosphorus sticks around a lot longer and is not as easily taken up as the other ones. How phosphorus gets utilized in the soil is different than the nitrogen and the potassium. So for that reason, it sticks around longer. This is basically too much leftover phosphorus from the last season. So again, like, I don't think it will cause me any issues, but from the moment you have excess amount of phosphorus in your soil, what issues you can run into is that other nutrients can't get taken in by the plants anymore, because it prohibits the nutrient accessibility. This is the same also with the pH, for example. If the pH is not in the optimal range, this is the other thing I always keep a close eye on, in which range we're with the pH, because once you're out of the optimal range, it's the same thing. Micronutrients are not as easily accessible in the plants anymore as they are in this optimal pH range. And this is true for most plants, but I'll make a little asterisk to it. There are a few acidic soil loving plants, like those berries, blueberries, I think rhododendrons and stuff. Like, there are on the side of preferring more acidic soil than other plants, but for most plants, they prefer like this optimal pH range in here. So I'm digressing, but what is important is really not to make it worse this season to with the phosphorus, to get into those issues that I see yellowing leaves and have some other nutrient issues just causing by this excess of phosphorus. What we will do is I will add, because also the nitrogen deficiency was very, very visible in all my beds, I will add in the beginning of the year a good amount of blood meal to really get the nitrogen fixed to get started with. And then when I will fertilize this season, I will more fertilize with in nitrogen fertilizer and try to keep the phosphorus out of the fertilizer equation to just make sure that I'm not like making that problem even worse over time. And then we'll see next year in the soil test if that strategy was a good one, because that is the other thing with soil. You do not fully know if this was a good measure. Be conservative. Don't overdo it. I did always add a lot of compost to my garden and to my beds. And after I did a little bit of research, like where is that excess phosphorus coming from, but also how to get rid of it, most sources said that compost is a huge source of phosphorus, especially supposedly in our region here in New England. So for that reason, I won't add any compost for this year. Probably on the top of it, I will mulch with pine bark mulch, which is supposed to help with this issue a little bit as well. So we will see. But this is also one important example of like why in soil test is really helpful. Those results can look very, very different for your garden and for your beds as well, but you will never know until you have some data to it, right? So that is probably what I will do in most cases, add some nitrogen, making sure that my fertilizing needs are adjusted to the results I'm seeing here, but then also for example, where did I have it? Here, bed number 3, a lot of them are in the optimal range, but when we look here, the copper, magnesia, sulfur, and even those ones, they're like lingering on the bottom ones. So I will add a little bit of azomite to this bed as well. This contains a lot of micronutrients, just to give it a little bit pump up so they don't get depleted, for example, mid-season. One other thing which I really like about MySoil is that they provide you on the bottom in recommendation on how much you need to fix your problem of a given fertilizer. So they see here, you can see here that they recommend in high nitrogen fertilizer for the organic one, and you can here, for example, just look by the different size of your garden bed how much you need to really fix the problem over here. And over on the top here, you can also jump to the products they recommend. It's typically a link to Amazon, something easy and accessible. And here's the blood meal. I do have in local nursery where I can get it as well. So I'm not bothering shipping this over Amazon, but it's helpful to see that you have access to those products. And here, for example, this is a link to the azomite for those micronutrients. So it's so handy to have all of those links and everything so ready for you together that you are able to access them. And that's really one of the main reasons why I use MySoil test now for the 3rd year running. This video is not sponsored. I paid for all of those tests with my own money. They are a little bit more expensive than in soil test you would do with your extension office, for example. And they also just do those basic macro and micronutrient soil tests. So if you need something more detailed with, for example, like heavy metal analysis or anything like that, you got to do it at your extension office. Those are also a lot more expensive, but I basically buy those tests for the convenience of doing them very, very fast and with very low fuss, and really having those great results. And now also the comparison over the years in just one portal really is the key for me here, and why I've been using them for 3 years. So curious to hear from you. Have you used soil tests, or if you had any questions along the way, right? This is all based on my research. I put a few research links below so you are able to do your own research. There are a couple cool, really neat websites from some other extension offices which had really nice graphs and tables to explain all of those micronutrients, etc. So I didn't want to bore you with that. I thought that might be a little bit too much for here, but if you have any question and I'm able to answer it, more than happy to do so. So leave me that in the comment. And yeah, I hope you stick around to see how my garden is growing and how those soil adjustments will work out for us in the future to really grow what happy and healthy plants, what we want, of course, right? So yep, subscribe here and watch another video. Thank you.